Good evening. I'd like to call the May 13th, 2021 meeting of the Westwood School Committee to order. I'm going to begin with the roll call attendance. Charlie Donahue.
Here.
Carol Lewis. Carol, I think you're muted.
Here.
Tony Mullen.
Here.
Amanda Phillips.
Here.
Maya Plotkin.
Here.
Great. I'd also like to recognize the live broadcast and online stream that is made available through the Westwood Media Center and also online at www.westwood.k12.ma.us/live. This is in order to provide real-time public access to the activities of the school committee in accordance with the March 12th, 2020 Executive Order of Governor Baker. As this is the first meeting of the school committee following the annual town meeting, this is the meeting where the school committee reorganizes. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for the position of chair.
I'd like to make a motion. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion nominating Maya Plotkin for chair of the school committee.
I'd second that.
Any discussion?
I mean, she doesn't have much else to do, but I think she can do it.
So much free time.
Yep.
All right. Seeing no more discussion, I will call the roll. All in favor, Charlie Donahue,
Yes.
Carol Lewis,
Yes.
Tony Mullen,
Yes.
Amanda Phillips,
Yes.
and Maya Plotkin.
Yes.
All right. Well, congratulations, Maya.
Thank you.
And with that, I will metaphorically hand the gavel over to you.
Okay.
Here.
Okay, at this point, to continue the reorganization, I would like to entertain a motion to elect the vice chairperson.
I nominate Charlie Donahue to be vice chair.
A second.
Okay, any discussion? No? Okay, let's take the roll call. Charlie Donahue,
Yes.
Carol Lewis,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Congratulations, Charlie.
Thank you.
And at this point, I would like to entertain a motion to elect the clerk of the school committee.
So I nominate Tony Mullen for clerk.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Nope. Okay. Calling for a vote. Charlie,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So congratulations, Tony.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the swift reorg. That was great. And before I move on to the superintendent's report, I would like to take a minute and thank Carol for her amazing service over this past year as chair. Carol, you took the helm in the early stages of this pandemic, and since then, it has been one challenge after another. But through it all, you steered this committee with intellect, with professionalism, and most importantly, with compassion. We've had hard decisions to make, and we've had hard conversations, not only with the community, but with each other. And at times, to be honest, I know it was really hard to sit here, but your leadership lightened our collective load. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the committee when I thank you with deep gratitude and appreciation for your chairpersonship this year. We literally could not have made it through without you. So thank you, Carol, for everything.
Thank you. Those are kind words, Maya. I appreciate
They're all
it.
true. And I understand that you now are the proud recipient of an engraved Westwood clock
Yes.
that I hear is sitting proudly in your living room.
Yes, it is. Yes. Thank you
So that
all.
was to thank you for your service and continued service to this committee. So thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you for those kind words, Maya. My
It's
pleasure.
true. You were a rock for us this year. So
Thank you.
Thank you again, Carol.
okay, so let's move on to the superintendent's report. I will turn it over to Emily Parks.
All right, great. Thank you. So I'm just going to start tonight with a quick update about our COVID data and some other things related to that topic. So these are just the graphs that I have been sharing with you each week. And I actually did just take a look because the state just released the numbers for this week. And we actually have dipped our case counts down even lower. So for the past 14 days, it's now at 17. So you can see we're in a fairly good place at the moment as far as that goes. And so correspondingly, if we take a look at the average daily incidence rate, we had talked about the fact that things really came down as we moved into March. We had another little surge in April, but things do seem to be headed back down in the right direction again. And so it is the same story with the percent positivity. And again, this is even lower on this week's report. It's about 1.4% right now in Westwood overall. Where we stand right now, the COVID team, so far this year, we had 272 positive cases of students and staff. This was interesting. We actually hit the 2,000 line on the Excel spreadsheet sometime last week in terms of the number of students and staff that the COVID team has tracked. That's positive cases, but also people who are close contacts. And they've provided consultation to 700 individuals beyond those 2,400. The shape of the graph in terms of how the cases are distributed by age has remained fairly constant over time. And this is just the pie chart that shows us where our percentage of positive cases have fallen throughout the year with the big surge in December, January, February, things came down, little surge again in April. And we're, about halfway through May, but so far things seem to be tracking fairly well. We have received since the last school committee meeting updated guidance regarding quarantines, which has been very, very helpful. And so though the definition of a close contact remains the same, so that still is somebody who's been within 6 feet of a positive individual for 15 minutes or more cumulatively, even when masked. The updated guidance that schools got was that only close contacts who were within 3 feet need to quarantine. So though we are still required to notify parents if their student has been designated as a close contact, some of those people don't need to quarantine. And, that was good news because, of course, a consequence of coming back to school at 3 feet was that we were getting a large number of close contacts needing to quarantine. And so this has really mitigated that, which is very helpful. So the close contacts who are between 3 and 6 feet don't need to quarantine as long as they remain symptom-free. In terms of our student COVID testing program, we are actually continuing to see some increase in the percentage of students who are participating. So that's been good to see. District-wide, though, overall, we still are at just over 50%. We did see a jump here at the high school. I suspect that this is related to prom attendance at this point. We did get some good news that the state announced that it will continue to fund pool testing through the end of August. So I think at the last meeting, they had said they would do it through the end of the school year, and they have now said through the end of August. So that allows us to continue the pool testing program during our ESY and summer programs. Our staff testing participation does continue to decline as staff members are fully vaccinated. That seems reasonable to me, and it's making me, think about whether or not we will need that in place in the fall. As I mentioned, the prom, so tomorrow night is the prom, the senior prom, and participating in either our pool testing or producing a negative PCR test is a requirement for attendance at the prom tomorrow night. And they had to be tested today. So our team, Amanda Fairbanks, big thank you to her. I have seen her, literally, I've been able to see her running back and forth all day because people were pulling up in their cars and she was running out to swab them, I think. So 98% of the prom attendees were in fact tested through our pool testing program today. And I thought I had my, I skipped this slide. So I meant to mention, so our quarantine monthly snapshot again is much improved from where we were last month. And that I think is due to both the lower number of cases, but also to that change in requirements around close contacts quarantining. So things are in fairly stable shape right now. Let me just stop and ask if there are any questions about.
At previous meetings, excuse me, did somebody else want to talk?
No, go ahead, Charlie, go ahead.
Sorry. 50% of our kids have been given permission to be tested. And I had asked, how does that rank relative to other communities? And I had heard some of them at 60, 70% or something like that. And do we have any updated data of where we stand relative to other communities? And is there any thought being given to maybe find out what is the concern of the parents who don't give permission, and to do some messaging and communications to them to explain to them why it's important, why we'd like to have this done, why it would be helpful to them and their kids? Anything along those lines to try to improve on it, and partly by maybe pointing out to the community that I would think we are not up at the cutting edge of large numbers of parents giving permission.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the data that I have compared to other schools is really just anecdotal, that I've been in meetings with other superintendents where I've thrown out that question. And I can tell you there are a number of districts that are right where we are. I think probably most of them. There are some who, whose participation is considerably higher. My sense is that that is in districts where they are requiring participation in pool testing in order to participate in athletics or extracurriculars. I think that is the sort of the difference that you see in terms of participation.
And I think my question is there any, I feel uncomfortable with just 50% of the kids being tested. And I'm just trying to figure out a way, can we educate people through messaging and go at it again? Is anybody recommending that the testing is important for athletics when you're out in the fresh air running up and down fields? Is that really an issue? I'm just trying to come up with what could be done to improve on that. And if other towns have figured it out, other than just having rules to require it, I think it would be well worth looking at to see if there are things that we could do to improve. Because as time goes on, we're not now getting in Massachusetts large numbers of these variants, but that is an issue that is being pointed out as a real threat to the future, even in states that are well ahead of it, and it's a real problem in some states. So I think this idea of doing the testing may be very, very important in the future, and I think the most we can do to maybe make people feel comfortable in why we're doing it. And I'm just thinking, as in anything more we could do to educate families on why to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think there's probably, and when we're on the discussion item for planning for next year, I think there's probably a bigger conversation to have about pool testing and what direction we're going in and how that's going to shake out in the fall. And I'm curious to get the committee's input about that issue.
Because the kids we've picked up so far, if those kids weren't tested and were going home and playing sports outside of the schools, I mean, those are a lot of kids that we have already found that could be infecting other people. And we found them and we educated them and we got some of them out of commission and we've done the testing. But if we hadn't have found all those kids, how much worse off would we be as a town, not just a school system? And that's a substantial number of teachers and students we found already.
Mm-hmm. I would add that I think the other benefit of the testing program has been that it's given us good data about the return to in-person learning. And, I wondered sort of what volume we would be catching in the pool testing. And I have to say, I've been pretty pleased that the numbers have been as low as they have been. So I found that to be very reassuring. because it's what we thought would happen, but it's good to have that confirmed.
So my other, we can punt on this question till later or till June. I think the big question we're hearing from isn't so much about testing, but it's about vaccinations.
Yes.
I'm interested in that guidance from DESE. I wonder if do we anticipate any guidance from DESE? Because, for example, that guidance from DESE is actually different than CDC guidance about close contact. So CDC guidance on a close contact, if you've been fully vaccinated, would say you don't have to quarantine at all. So I didn't know, do you anticipate the commissioner giving any guidance on, just in general, on vaccinations in the coming months?
Yes. Sorry, I should clarify that we also are implementing that if you are fully vaccinated, you're not quarantining, and that's a very important clarification. I think that was true even before they made this distinction about the number of feet. So yes, we've had students who have been designated as close contacts at high school. They're fully vaccinated. They don't have to quarantine. We've had the same thing with staff members. Do I anticipate guidance around vaccination from the state? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's a big question. I know.
Yeah. So, and again, we can talk about this during discussion. I mean, what I've heard so far from the commissioner from DESE is that they will be releasing what they're calling initial guidance about next fall on every topic, right? They said mid to late May. They've also been clear, though, that this is initial guidance because the medical folks want to wait and sort of get more data and see how things evolve. And they've told us to anticipate getting more guidance at the end of June, early July. And, you can imagine how that went over with hundreds of superintendents as a timeline, because that is, that's a highly problematic timeline from our perspective. And I certainly do understand the desire to delay, because look how fast the guidance is changing, right? In terms, I think what you're asking, though, is there a chance the state might mandate vaccines? Is that what you're wondering? I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
To tell you the truth, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I will, I'll just move on to MCAS. I don't have slides for this, but I prepared a memo in your packet. So, as everything has been evolving, one of the things that's been changing is whether or not MCAS was going to happen, and if so, in what form. And so MCAS has now begun. We in Massachusetts are proceeding with MCAS testing this spring, although the state has said that it is suspending the usual accountability system for next year. And so this spring, districts are required to administer MCAS both in person and remotely for students who are fully remote. So our fully remote students in grades 3 to 8 are taking their MCAS test at home while the district provides virtual proctoring. A remote option is not available at the high school. And so all of the fully remote students were given the opportunity to choose to come in to take the test in person. If they chose not to do that in grades 3 to 8, then they can take it virtually at the high school. If a fully remote student didn't want to come in, then they have the option of just not testing this spring. And then they will need to test next year during the retest period. So the changes this year are that at both elementary and middle school, the state did reduce the number of testing sessions, which I thought was a welcome change. So in grades 3, 4, and 5, they're taking ELA and math. In grade 5, they also take science. Grades 6, 7, and 8, ELA and math. Grade 8 also takes science. Typically, they would take 2 sessions for each subject. This year, they're only taking 1 session for each subject. At the high school, this is quite important because, of course, at the high school, the MCAS is required in order to achieve a competency determination, which is what would allow you, in part, to get a diploma. And most of that competency testing actually takes place in 9th and 10th grade. And so DESE has established kind of a plan with respect to the competency determination. So the typical 10th grade ELA and math test and 9th grade biology test is taking place this spring. Unlike the other levels, there's no reduction in the number of testing sessions. So there are 8 dates at the high school where we're going to be engaged in MCAS testing over the coming weeks. The current 11th grade didn't take MCAS last spring because of the closure. And at the last minute, DESE, they had previously waived science as a requirement for the competency determination. And just within the last week or so, they announced that they will also waive the ELA and math MCAS for the current juniors. They are going to provide other criteria that we don't have yet, by which students can demonstrate that they've met the competency determination, which I assume will have something to do with what courses they take in their grades. At the high school level, individual MCAS results are used for things other than the competency determination. They're also involved with some of the scholarship eligibility for state colleges and universities, and also the seal of biliteracy. And so the juniors don't have to take it to graduate. We did need to give them the option to participate in case they want to be eligible for those things. So we have 85 juniors who have decided that they will participate in MCAS. So we are sort of folding them into the process as well. So other than that, I will say, I want to thank everybody again for their flexibility. Our staff has been great. Our technology people in particular, you can imagine that the process for figuring out how to virtually proctor remote MCAS has been something, but we're somehow doing it. And I will also thank the kids at Martha Jones who were taking MCAS yesterday. It is a computer-based test, and of course the power went out. I don't know why, but just because we needed one more challenge for this year, the power went out during MCAS. And so our first strategy was to wait to see if it would come back on, but eventually we had to call DESE and say we need to pack it in for today. And I actually didn't hear, Allison, maybe the plan was just to start up again today, and the state was optimistic that whatever work the kids had done would be saved. So it was saved. All right, great. So it was saved. So we're back.
I can't confirm that it was saved, but I didn't hear otherwise. I think we would have heard
probably would have heard the sad news if it had not been saved. Yeah,
well,
It actually was saved. I can attest that it was saved. And
all right, Ms. Tobin says it was.
We're completed today.
Okay, great. So good job to, in particular, the Martha Jones students who persevered through that blip. So over the next few weeks, we will just work our way through MCAS. And then finally, let me just one second. I'm gonna get to my other presentation here. So we are, of course, working on all kinds of end of the year wrap up and transition events, and there's more than this happening, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think are of particular interest. So we're very happy that we have been able to get off the ground a collaboration with HALE for our 5th graders. We were talking about this, I think, a year or so ago, and we hope someday that we might be able to do this at HALE. But for now, we have a program happening with all of our grade 5 students where folks from HALE are actually coming to them and are going to be running this program with HALE facilitators leading some team building challenges for grade 5 students in small groups. We want to make sure that 5th graders have this common experience across schools. And part of the experience is that they're going to create a collaborative product from all the students in all 5 elementary schools that is going to greet them in the fall at Thurston. So we think it's a nice kind of closing activity. The 5th graders are also now involved in their orientation to the middle school. And so for that orientation, Mr. Redman and one of the guidance counselors from the middle school goes to visit the 5th graders at each elementary school. And then the 5th graders and their parents come to the middle school for a visit. We've been running these on Wednesday afternoons. There is a parent orientation out in the tent with Mr. Redmond, so they get to experience what it's like to, I think they actually even sit on the buckets that the kids sit on in the tent and hear the presentation. And then the students also tour the building with Mr. K. So that is in progress. In
Emily,
terms
just
of,
a question on that.
Sure.
Do we, how do we work with the new kids coming into Westwood from Metco going into the 6th grade? Do they have a separate orientation, or do we maybe get them together with the kids that are also in the 5th grade moving up, as a part of the orientation? How do we handle that
Yeah.
orientation?
So that's not part of this, but Allison may be better than I, but we do have a program, Running Start, I think is what we call it, correct? Maybe
Yes,
with a new name.
Yes, I think traditionally, and I'm hoping that this is true this year, we have been able to get our new class of Boston resident students in with the other 5th graders for some of that programming. I don't know if it's happening this year or not, but they typically do join right in when we do these transition activities. And then I know, I don't know kind of where we are with Running Start for this year, but I know Ms. Frank, the Metco director, is looking to kind of create an even more robust transition program for our incoming Boston kids to kind of get them even more into the building and able to sort of acclimate to the new building and meet some peers and meet some, kind of get the lay of the land out here in Westwood before they start. So.
The thing that struck me, the meeting with the Metco people at their banquet last year, was they loved Westwood. They loved the welcoming, but they all had to leave behind all of their friends from the 1st to the 5th grade. And so it was a brand new experience. And they thanked Westwood for the welcoming, but it was a very sensitive topic and challenge. And I think we've done a wonderful job in the past, but with all of the COVID and everything else, it makes it even more of a challenge to try to do it. But thank you for that answer.
So for the 8th grade, I want to thank the Thurston PTO because they've really been instrumental in planning these end of year celebrations. And you can see they've got all kinds of fun things planned: field days, ice cream trucks, a barbecue, yearbook signing. And we're doing on June 16th, moving up ceremony that will be outdoors on Flahay Field. We also are doing some orientation activities for the transition between 8th and 9th grade. So there will be a video welcome and orientation from Ms. Davenport. And then there is a visitation day where the 8th graders come to the high school for tours of the building. And then we're going to be doing our breakout groups outdoors, hosted by the Westwood Ambassadors, which is a group of high school students who do this kind of orientation work. And then finally, of course, lots happening at the high school. Thank you to the Westwood High School PTO. They are sponsoring ice cream socials for each grade. So 4 different events for each grade. And then there's lots going on for seniors. The prom, of course, tomorrow. There are senior week activities, senior week long games and a picnic. We hope that we're going to be able to get some student musical performances together. That's in the works. Of course, we're doing a reprise of the reimagined senior sunset from last year, which you see photographed here. And then a big thank you to all of the parent volunteers from Westwood Community in Action who are planning an all-night grad party. The all-night grad party is going to be mostly outdoors. And it's a slightly shortened time frame. It's not actually all night, but it's going to be mostly outdoors and then moving in to the building for the last, I think, 2 hours of the evening. So again, this is just a glimpse. I'm sure there are all kinds of school-based activities that are happening, but a lot going on in the district. And I think that, I also did want to do a shout out to Allison, who has just been named the secretary of the Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education. So congratulations, Allison. And she's been very involved in that group and has done a lot of good work for them. And now she's taking.
I wanted to take notes, and now I'm the secretary. So that's it's a way to infiltrate.
All right, there you go. So, congratulations to her. And finally, I just wanted to mention to the committee, I forwarded to the announcement from Amy Davenport, the high school principal, that We have a new high school dean of students starting in the summer. His name is Tom Millett. And he is currently the Dean of Students at Excel Academy, which is a school in East Boston. It was a rigorous and thorough process that the high school ran, and we're happy to have Mr. Millett joining us. And we'll look forward to welcoming him. Even though he doesn't technically start until the end of August, I think he is planning to come in before the end of the school year to have an opportunity to meet some students, to meet parents. So we certainly look forward to that. And I'll take this opportunity to do a big thank you to Brian Sheehan, who was pressed into service as the interim dean of students this year, and he has done a fantastic job. We thank him profusely for the job that he's done and for his contributions. And I think it's safe to say that Mr. Sheehan is really looking forward to getting back into the classroom next year. And lots of kids will benefit from that because he's a fantastic history teacher. So thank you to Brian. That's
Okay. Thank you. And thank you to Brian as well. It's been an interesting year. You're right. We did press him into that role and he rose to the occasion. So we echo your thanks very much. Okay, so we are now moving on to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where members of the community have the opportunity to comment, to make their concerns heard, to provide feedback to the school committee on anything pertaining to the Westwood Public Schools. Just a reminder, when you participate, we ask that you provide your name and address, that you address me as the chair, and that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. We do have a helpful reminder clock showing you your time. And so with that, I think, Connor, I think the way we're doing this is people raise their hands. Is that correct?
Yes, so people can raise their hands. You as chair would call on whoever will be unmuted. I would unmute them and they would have the ability to unmute themselves, at which point they would give their name, address, and then I will start the timer. For people who are watching on YouTube or on cable, at the bottom of the screen in just a second, you'll see the Zoom information. So if you do want to join in, all you need to do is log into Zoom that way, and then you'll have the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. And that's about it.
Great, thank you, Connor. All right, I see Brian Kamenker has raised his hand. So if you could unmute him.
Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself right now.
Brian, are you there?
I'm sending him a ping to unmute him.
Oh, wait, there he is.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. Yeah.
Okay.
If you could just give us your name and address to begin, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Brian Kamenker. I live at 95 University Avenue. I'm also the chairman of the Westwood Republican Town Committee. There's a reason I'm mentioning that. The diversity presentation that was given last month has gone around town, and there are a lot of people that are very upset and frightened, I mean, to put it mildly, about that. And they have contacted us. And I think the reason that they're contacting us is there is this fear that they're safe with us. We're not going to attack them. Their kids aren't going to be harassed talking to us. They're not going to lose their jobs. There's that real fear in this environment. And I would also like to say that the overwhelming majority of the feedback we're getting is from people who are not Republicans. You know, this idea of replacing normal coursework in high school and middle school with this race stuff is very frightening to people. And you know, the first question that people are asking is, where's the statistics that we need this? You know, we haven't been presented with any study or anything that Westwood is a racist town, or that you have so much extra time and money that you know that you can do this. I mean, the things that we're seeing here, you know, this race-based, i.e. racist hiring that you're going to be doing, you know, replacing English literature, Shakespeare and Chaucer, and, you know, with, you know, missing perspectives, you know, all this business about, you know, anti-racism and, you know, exploring, you know, people's racist attitudes. You know, one mother said to me that this is basically race hustlers doing it for the money, and I think I would tend to agree. And we've gotten a lot of similar kinds of comments. This is just basically a lot of Marxism, and that's what it appears to me to be. I mean, where does this come from? Who thinks this stuff up? You know, here's an idea that I would suggest. You know, if there are people in this town that want this with their kids, and I imagine there might be, make it an elective. Don't put it into people's classes where instead of, you know, learning normal things, they're learning this nonsense. You know, I think you should seriously consider that, because I will tell you, if you go down this road, there will be two outcomes. One outcome is we'll have the biggest Republican town community in Massachusetts. And the second is you will have a civil war on your hands. And, you know, when people elect a school committee, all they want is a little common sense. I think that's a pretty low bar. So please seriously reconsider this. Thank you.
Can I jump in?
What's that, Amanda?
Can I just make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to point out that there are a lot of people in this community that support diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And there are a lot of people in this community that feel that they're not included. And I will 100% support this work that we're doing.
Thank you, Amanda. I agree. Thank you. Okay, calling on Donna Morrison next, if you could unmute her.
Donna should have the ability to unmute herself.
Hi, Donna Morrison, 303 Oak Street. I just wanted to thank you all for steering our community through a very difficult and stressful school year, seeing us through the testing and vaccination of the staff and testing of students, through the hybrid and the reintroduction of students into the school system. It's been a very difficult year at best, and I just want to applaud you all and all the staff in the town. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, Heather Morrison.
Hi, this is Heather Morrison at 74 Magnolia Drive. I wanted to add on from Emily's comments earlier that I absolutely appreciate and understand the frustration that you have about the pace at which DESE is releasing guidance. As a school administrator, I feel your pain. And I would encourage you and the school committee to, when thinking ahead to the fall, because DESE probably will be slow and steady as they have been, that you really focus on what's coming out now from the CDC just today, what Dr. Fauci is saying about that schools should be planning for pre-pandemic normalcy, and really have that in mind as you plan for the fall. DESE will eventually catch up with that, but we know that their pace is slow. I would also just add about pool and surveillance testing. Again, just today, EOHHS just updated their guidance related to surveillance testing with congregate care, and they are no longer recommending testing for those who are vaccinated. So I would anticipate, again, DESE will catch up with that eventually, but that we likely won't be testing individuals who are vaccinated. So again, not surprising that the teachers aren't participating, because they probably won't be in the future anyways, as well as, 12 and up students as everybody gets vaccinated. And my last point was just, I noticed that later you're reviewing a mask policy, and I'm just hoping that given everything that just came out today, you'll probably table that for now, because it seems inappropriate to really start going forward with a detailed mask policy when all of the recommendations just changed today. So that's all, and thank you all for everything. Bye.
Thank you, Heather. I do not see any other hands up. Connor, I don't know if there's anyone on the phone or.
No, the attendees list that you're seeing is the same. I do not see anybody else at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I will close public participation and we will move on to the school committee chair updates and the liaison reports. Starting with the building project update, which I can provide. The big news in the project, we have a couple big pieces of news. The first is that in April, I think it was after our school committee meeting, the MSBA voted to grant the town of Westwood a reimbursement grant for the Hanlon-Deerfield project of an amount up to $18.2 million. So this is their official commitment to the town of Westwood based on the budget that we have submitted. And we were very excited to get that vote. And that that's really the sort of the final step in that process. Of course, we continue to work with the MSBA through the project, but this is really the final number that we will see from them. And we were really excited to get that vote. So that's a piece of good news. And the other piece of good news was that at town meeting last week, the town, I would say, very resoundingly agreed to fund the bridge funding request that we made. This was for $1.46 million to allow our designers to continue to work over the summer to keep this project on budget and on schedule prior to the big fall town meeting vote, where we will ask the town to approve the full project. So again, we appreciated that vote. Our designers have already started setting up meetings with key stakeholders, faculty, staff, members of the town government to really get this design development phase moving, which is exactly what we're in now. So we've submitted for schematic design. That phase is over, and now we are officially moving into the design development phase of the project. So that was very exciting. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the Hanlon-Deerfield project. I think I've bored everyone to tears with it at this point. And then finally, I did want to give an update on Sheehan. As you will recall, we have laid out a timeline that we think is a doable timeline for Sheehan. And we have also said that, with respect to the MSBA and a Sheehan project, we've always sort of said this, it's very unlikely that we would be accepted into the MSBA reimbursement grant program for Sheehan so soon after, in fact, still working with them on the Hanlon-Deerfield project. And we were sort of inclined at the time not to submit a statement of interest, not just for that reason, for the low likelihood, but also because the statements of interest are due in April. And the team was just really swamped with trying to get kids back in school, trying to get all the logistics involved and really sort of work out the end of year logistics. And so at the time we made the decision not to submit a statement of interest. The MSBA subsequently pushed that deadline to the end of June, mid to end June. And we now have a lot of free time on our hands, right, Emily? So we are thinking that in the interests of sort of fiduciary responsibility to the town, Emily and her team, Lemma, I know, is working hard on this. We actually are going to submit a statement of interest. We think that, again, the likelihood is very low that we will be accepted, but we feel that we have the resources to try, and we'd like to try. We will hear in December whether or not we're accepted into the program, and that actually will not delay our timeline at all, the timeline that we had proposed. We do have time to submit and wait for that decision and still sort of maintain our time frame. So we are going to be asking this committee to take a vote on that at the end of the meeting. If we approve it, then I believe the next step is for the select board to take a vote on it at its meeting. And once we have both of those votes, we would, finish up the application and submit the statement of interest for Sheehan. So that's where we are. Did I miss anything, Emily?
No, just that. So the vote, basically what it is that Lem and I have looked at this. We think it's very doable. And it's doable in part because of the work that the school committee had done for the very high level Sheehan design study. We sort of have all the information we need about Sheehan at our fingertips in order to put together a good statement of interest that really, was clear about what all the needs of the building are. And so given sort of this opportunity with the extension in the deadline from the MSBA, we think it just makes sense to put it in and see what happens. So the vote is that in order for Lemma and I to submit an SOI, both the school committee and the select board has to authorize us to do that, to get into the process. So that's what we're hoping the committee would do.
And it's true also that if we submit the statement of interest and it doesn't, and it's not accepted, we can just resubmit.
Absolutely.
You can, and in fact, that's a very typical experience that districts had. Like we've had our experience has been the exception where we put in the SOI for Hanlon and we got in. That isn't usually what happens. And so we could put in this year. And yeah, I mean, if for some reason we didn't get it in, we could put in this following year as well.
And it can't hurt us
No.
with the state or with getting support from Westwood.
No, and as I said, I think that this, this is really the responsible thing to do. And now with this delay, with the extension that the MSBA gave communities, it made it much more feasible for us to do this. And so we're going to take advantage of that and just, see what happens. And if we put it in and it's not accepted, we certainly can resubmit, and maybe we will. But I think that, we're in a good position now. As Emily said, we've got the data, we've got the materials we need. And so I think it makes sense. Okay. All right, moving on to the COVID-19 advisory group. Tony?
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief, I think Emily covered some of it. I think a few things to note. I mean, I think as Emily referenced, if you've been following the metrics, there is some good news. The metrics are really improving in the Commonwealth, both on deaths, hospitalizations, cases. So, Westwood's reflecting that. I think as we've talked at the advisory group, we're very much forward looking. I think we're thinking about the fall and really vaccinations and testing, everything we've talked about. So we're really, we're thinking about what that will look like. You probably saw the news that vaccination has now been approved for 12 and over for Pfizer. So it's obviously a personal choice, but I've had one daughter vaccinated and I'm going to have another in the next few weeks. So we are encouraging that, but I think that's all going to be, we're going to continue to follow the metrics. This is very fast moving, but at least right now, the trend in the Commonwealth is looking very good, and we will have to, determine some things. So that's kind of, I think, the basic, the big piece. And the other thing I just want to update, I just do want to make a pitch on my other liaison role for the high school. The all-night graduation party still needs a lot of volunteers. I volunteered for some ungodly hour late at night, but please, it's generally been something that the other freshman, sophomore, and junior parents have done. So if you're on this and you probably got an email, please spend a few hours of your time and participate in volunteering. That will make this a success. I know this senior class has gone through a lot, and I'd really encourage everyone to participate if you can.
Tony, correct if I'm wrong, the volunteer, you don't have to volunteer for the whole event. Do they put you on shifts? Yeah, they put you on shifts.
Like 3 hours, yes. Like 3 hours, yes.
Yeah, and I think the shift that they're looking for the most now is the 11:30 to 2 a.m. shift. That's
gonna be the fun one. It's gonna be the fun one.
That's the one Tony's at, so everyone should want to volunteer there.
I did that for about 8 years. That is the best shift. So
yeah.
I think if you volunteer for that shift, you get to see the hypnotist, which is like marquee event, and the senior video.
Oh,
so that'd be fun.
That sounds great. So yes, please volunteer. If you didn't get the email, you can contact any one of us or Principal Davenport, and I'm sure anyone would be happy to send you that email. Okay, I have one more thing under this the chair update, and this is to talk about the superintendent's evaluation process. This is, as you know, an annual process. And just to give a brief summary, in Massachusetts, superintendents are required to have goals in the following areas: professional practice goal, student learning goal, and 2 district improvement goals. And in the fall, if you recall, the school committee approved the superintendent's goals. Typically, the superintendent's goals are written largely in concert with the objectives that we've outlined in the strategy for district improvement. This year, the superintendent's goals were actually largely written to reflect sort of the unique needs of this year. So that's a little bit different than most years. In addition, each goal is aligned with an area on the Massachusetts model rubric for superintendents, and that is still true this year as well. So through the superintendent's reports and other presentations, as you know, the superintendent has kept us, the school committee, apprised of her work on these goals. And as part of the evaluation process, the school committee now needs to comment on her progress on these goals. So in addition to assessing the work she has done around the goals, the school committee needs to provide her with feedback and a rating in 4 areas, as well as an overall rating. The 4 areas are instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So to get this done, the superintendent will prepare a brief self-assessment that reflects and highlights some of her accomplishments in her areas of growth this year. I do want to note these 4 evaluation standards are broad and they encompass many facets of the superintendent's work, and it's pretty difficult to comment comprehensively on everything that Superintendent Parks has done over the year. So I think when you're providing feedback, if you can keep in mind that the most useful feedback, particularly for a growth process, is if you focus on your comments on sort of a few accomplishments and priorities. And the Department of Education provides a model rubric, which is linked to in your packet, that describes each of the standards in detail. Actually, I don't know if it's linked into your packet, but we can send it if you would like it. So the ratings on each of the 4 evaluation standards and the overall rating are then submitted to the state in July. So between now and the June meeting, where we will have the evaluation, I'm asking members of the school committee to provide their input to the outgoing chair, so to Carol, because as Carol was in this leadership role last year during the period of evaluation, I will be asking Carol, and with the assistance of Tony, who was the prior chair as well, to compile the input and prepare the evaluation for presentation at our June meeting. This is typically the way we run them, just because she has the best knowledge of what's occurred over the past year. But absolutely provide your Carol, if that's okay with you. I realize that maybe I should ask you. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, Carol, you're
I'd be used to mute and unmute at this point. Sorry, I have to keep shifting here.
Yeah.
Yes, that's totally fine.
Okay. Great,
Okay.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
please provide your comments to Carol. She will compile them, and we'll sort of run this evaluation process at our June meeting. So are there any questions about that?
I don't have a question about that, but can I just provide a quick liaison update for CPAC?
Yes, thank you.
There are a couple cool, no, it's fine. There are a couple cool things happening. So they are launching a language-based learning differences parent support group. So that is brand new, and that is going to start next Wednesday. And then also very exciting, the Special Olympics Young Athletes program is getting off the ground like mid to late May. So students are able to register for that right now. So I just wanted to make sure.
That is great. And if parents want to participate in that workshop, do they go to the CPAC's Facebook page? Will the information be there?
It is. Yep.
Okay.
It's on the Facebook page. You can register right there. There's information about both of those opportunities on their page.
Perfect.
And if anybody has any trouble or maybe they're not on Facebook, I'm happy to connect them with the appropriate people.
Great. Thank you, Amanda.
No problem.
Any more liaison reports?
I got a couple of things if I could. Last October, the committee asked if I would begin to meet with the collaborative, which was started with Wellesley and 10 towns. It's expanded to 40 towns, and I've met with them Zoom every 2 weeks, and they've done innovative things, getting the cost of a test from $85 to $5, a lot of very creative things being suggested by all of these towns. It's a wonderful learning process of what all these towns are doing. It's going to get increasingly interesting as what all the towns are doing with regard to vaccines. I've had to miss a few meetings, but now that we have hired Amanda Fairbanks to do an awful lot of work for us, she has been attending those meetings. And I just think and she knows a lot more than I do about what's there and what's imaginative. So I just suggest maybe the future school committee meetings, we can ask Amanda to do an update on what the collaborative is doing. And there's a lot of national information coming in, et cetera, but I think it's still a valuable resource for us to draw on as we're all searching for these things without guidance in many cases. But thank you.
Great, thank you, Charlie. It's a good idea. That would give us a chance to thank Amanda in person. Any other liaison reports? Nope. Okay, moving on to our discussion items. The first thing is the student academic status and recovery.
Great, thank you. So we just wanted to provide an update tonight of some of the work that is in progress in the district as we think about how sort of assess where student skills are at the end of this year, and also to provide some programming over the summer, and even how we're thinking about intervention into the fall. So that's a big topic, but we're going to try to be relatively succinct here. And so Allison is going to talk for a few minutes about summer programming in Gen Ed. Abby's going to talk about extended school year for our special education students. And then Mr. Redman from the middle school is actually going to talk a little bit about the middle school intervention model and how that's shaping up for the fall. So I think I'm running the slides. So let me turn it over. And we'll turn it over to Allison.
So I wanted to note that, we're in kind of designing summer programming for general education. We had to kind of be thinking a little bit about the fact that the situation over the last 14 months has really impacted everybody at some level. And what is going to be the goal of our summer programming for extra support? And it's really focusing in on students where we are seeing sort of disproportionate impact. And also the focus of the programming is really about next year. We want to make sure that we kind of give everybody kind of what they need to gear up and have a great start to the fall. So that's the framework for the program. So the next slide shows a little bit about the early literacy plan. When we looked at our literacy information, our assessment data, really, and we did a fall round of data and we're able to pick up some students for literacy support, even this year with everything going on. And we'll be doing another round of assessment this spring. It was very clear that the place we needed to focus was in the early grades, where kids develop those sort of foundational literacy skills. It just so happens that next year, in addition to everything else with reopening, we're also going to be kind of working through some new guidance and regulations that have come out around early literacy. And so we wanted to get out in front of that. We want to make sure that we've got sort of our youngest kids with nice, strong skills starting the year next year. So we're focusing on students entering grades 1 to 3, looking at that assessment data. It'll be an in-person program kind of that takes place around the same time as typically we would have run summer enrichment. So 4 weeks in July, Monday through Thursday, half-day program. And the focus really is on what I call those foundational literacy skills, phonics, decoding, sight words. Those are sort of the how do you learn to read, and then reading comprehension and writing. Once you start reading, how do we make sure the ideas are sort of taking hold, and then you're able to sort of produce writing on your own. In addition to the kind of academic focus, we're also going to sort of layer in some enrichment activities, some things that are thematic and fun, so that the students who are there have a great time. We really want it to be as joyful as possible for kids, because we understand that this year has been hard, and we really want our students to associate reading with a great time as much as possible. So that's sort of the early literacy focus. Math, we actually are looking at the later elementary grades. whereas kids get a lot of sort of repeated practice with some foundational numeracy skills, things start to ramp up pretty quickly in grades 3, 4, and 5. And so our target for this program is students in the later grades who are going to be entering 4, 5, and 6. And the thinking behind this is that's really where, if we don't sort of shore up these skills, it can have an impact down the road as kids enter the middle school and beyond, and as they're trying to tackle more complicated tasks. So again, we're looking at data. Our math team has been taking data kind of throughout the year based on unit assessments, but they really want to look to see where kids land in a kind of end of year comprehensive assessment that they're going to be giving in early June. Unlike the other program, this program is really designed for later in the summer, and it's a Kickstart program. The idea is to sort of accelerate the kids into the start of the school year, help them kind of refresh these ideas and get more practice and get more comfort and confidence right before they then encounter some of the math that they will be learning in the first couple units of the year. And you can see the focus areas there. Again, they're still in that sort of fundamental arithmetic and numeracy bucket, but they're also things that kids will build on down the road in middle school. That's kind of the overview for some of the elementary. We also do have some programming that's going on that we haven't. I've talked with Principal Redmond about this, and we're looking at our rising 9th grade class to see if there's some students, small groups of students who might benefit from some additional programming this summer. That's probably going to be very tailored to the students and what they need in terms of kind of helping them make that transition to the high school. And in addition, as was indicated in the memo, we've got some credit recovery as well as a sort of 9th grade program at the high school to kind of help students who, again, have had some, we've seen disproportionate impact with some kids versus others. And we want to make sure for all of our students, we give them every opportunity to have a great year next year.
Thanks, Allison. So just pause to see if there are questions for Allison.
I'd just like to, first of all, thank you very much for what you're doing here. Very, very creative and innovative. And my question is more, we talked about this before, in how many kids have missed out in the pandemic? What grades, what subjects, and I think you've really honed in on that very well. How many kids could be eligible to take this class? How many would we hope for? What if we have an overabundance of kids than we can handle?
Right.
What about kids on individual education plans who may have missed more than others? How are we trying to help them? And if there's a real demand for this and a love for this, do we have any resources to continue it on beyond the days we have so far?
That's great questions. Abby's going to get into ESY, which is sort of for eligible students on IEPs. So she's going to talk a little bit about the special education counterpart to this. But I'll say looking at the data we have, mostly with literacy, the news isn't so bad. We're seeing pretty good things from kids. We're ballparking probably 25 to 30 students eligible in rising grade 1 and 2. And a smaller number, about half that in grade 3. So it's not a huge program from that perspective. Any kids who we might not be able to scoop up this summer, we're actually talking now about building a before school program to take place in the fall, so we can do some additional work, because we understand not everybody's going to be around in July. People have been dying to go and travel and live the rest of their lives. So if there are families for whom this isn't going to work, we want to be able to sort of keep working with them. And that's partly why the August program, we have more of a virtual component, because that way we can really reach kids even if they're off somewhere exciting and fun. We don't have as much clarity yet about math numbers, but so far, kind of based on what the math folks are seeing, they're anticipating those being fairly small groups. We really want to have these be effective groups, and to do that, we're going to really focus on those kids that we're seeing where the skills they need to kind of access the next unit are wobbly. So it's really skill focused.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Allison, how will parents be notified, or like when will that happen? Have they already been notified? What does that process look like?
We'll be reaching out on the literacy front very soon. The literacy team has already started pulling that list together, and they're just sort of checking to make sure the current data matches with what their assessment has been. Math will be a little later just because they're doing that end of year assessment in early June. So we'll be doing that after that early June assessment. And because the program's later and virtual, we feel like we've got a little more time to get to that.
Okay, well, so why don't we move on to Abby?
Sorry, maybe, sorry if you mentioned this, just a quick cost, sorry. I had to jump off for 1 minute. The cost of this is, and is this paid by somebody?
This is the curriculum and instruction budget of the Westwood Public Schools.
Okay.
Working on behalf of the people of Westwood. That's where.
No, yeah, I just was curious more. I wasn't like that. I was just curious if the federal government or anyone. Okay, great, thank you.
Free families, but the there's a big press conference about 70 million for summer and
yeah.
Not to us, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
We checked. We don't meet the criteria, so.
Thank you.
Okay. So Abby's just going to talk a bit about the special ed end of things. Here you go, Abby.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. Mr. Donahue, you gave me a great segue, so thanks for your thoughtful question. And what I thought I could do is give you a preview of ESY 2021. So I want to start out just quickly with a couple of themes. I think this year is a little different for us as well. And we're trying to really live the intention and spirit of the purpose of extended school year. So we're looking to connect kids and teachers and maintain connection. We're looking to continue to build and rebuild routine for students. We're thinking a lot about stability, and then beyond stability for kids, growth. And then trying to stay flexible. So providing these services to more students than perhaps we would have in previous years and in multiple modalities. So that's kind of the big picture lens for the summer this year. And just quickly to remind you what extended school year ESY is, it traditionally is focused on special education services in direct instruction, academic support, as well as related services to recoup skills that might be lost during the period of the summer vacation. In addition, this summer we'll be folding in what are called COVID compensatory services when that's appropriate. And we also are continuing to respond to just unique student-based situations where people need additional support. And I think that's kind of our three-pronged approach. That's what we've been advised by our Department of Ed to do. And I also think it's the right thing to do. These services will still be able to be provided remotely, and that's important for folks to know. And we're also going to use it to do some housekeeping. So we may continue to have a couple of meetings, and we may also do some testing so that we have students. We did this last summer, and you guys might remember this, so we don't have kind of like a big wave in September, that staff are really able to work on connections and being present with students as opposed to being swamped with testing in September. So I think it's going to cover a lot of ground. So I thought you might be interested to know who's extended school year been offered to this year. And in the parentheses at the end of each item, you can see the number that we reported to you last year. So the parentheses are the last year number as we were doing this looking ahead. And so you can see that true to what we've been forecasting for folks, we've increased the reach and footprint of ESY substantially for the summer. So we've offered it to 217 students. Those folks are located predominantly in the elementary school. That's what it historically looks like for us. So we have 17 at the preschool, 117 at elementary, 59 at middle school, and 24 students at the high school up through our transition program. And that's an increase that's substantial. I would just note that not all the students that we offer ESY to choose to attend. So I don't anticipate having exactly that large number across all the different levels, but that's who the services have been offered to. In terms of the staffing, we're also going to see a related rise in the number of staff. So last year we were sharing with you that we intended to hire approximately 81 people to provide the ESY program preschool all the way up through age 22. And this year we're targeting about 93 people. And so you can kind of see that incremental increase as well. And again, the increase really sits in the fact that if you have more students, you just need to maintain a smaller instructional ratio, so you have more adults. However, it's not as large an increase, and that's because many of the speech, OT, PT related service folks service students across multiple grade levels. We're continuing to offer a remote option for ESY services. And I just thought you might be curious to see who's indicating that they're looking for that for this coming summer, as opposed to last summer. So the same idea here. You could say, for example, in the preschool last year, we had heard from about 5 folks that they anticipated wanting to have their ESY services offered in a remote model. And this year we've heard from a single family. It doesn't mean that it'll stay that way. Somebody might change their mind either way, and that's okay. However, I thought the trend was really interesting. I did want to note that at middle and high school, currently we're not hearing from a lot of people for sure that they want their services remotely. And if you see the little asterisks from last year, I remember putting that in, and that was because sometimes you offer services to big kids and they decline because they go and do something else that they want to do, like a job or something else. And so that's the number of kids we had offered it to last year, not the number that took it. Finally, we're going to do the same approach we had last year in terms of limiting our footprint. So we're going to have a lot of programming at Downey, and then only one other location, which will be almost the entirety of the high school campus. And that's, again, to open up the middle school for other purposes and to provide us with a manageable and maintainable footprint. That worked really well last summer, and we found that people actually really liked being together. So this summer, the Downey School will host all entering kindergarten through 5th grade extended school year programming. And the high school preschool campus will host the preschool, the high school, and all of the Thurston Middle School students for ESY, as well as our transition students who really use it as a hub and a home base for college courses, jobs, internships, etc. We'll continue to offer the normal range of programming that we offer in terms of number of weeks. So students can be offered between 4, 5, 6, 7, in some cases 8 weeks of programming. And our date range this year will start as soon as June 28th, which is not shortly after we have our last day of school. And then we'll continue through August 20th. And we are also doing what we're calling a gradual resumption of in-home ABA home services for students. And that's a process where we're working collaboratively with families and with staff across the summer to match people up who are comfortable working together in someone's home, and with the expectation that for September, home services will be in person in homes 100%. And in terms of what we are planning on for kind of how to pull this off, we have continued to reference the most current guidelines, and I wrote this on May 1st, and the guidelines have changed already. So we will continue to do that, although at a certain point we will have to make a decision about which set of guidelines we're using for logistics planning purposes for ESY. We'll continue our hand washing and hygiene, our mask wearing. I understand tonight there'll be some discussion around updating a policy, so we'll continue to track along with whatever the most updated policy is at the time we start. And we foresee offering student and staff testing, as well as the mechanism of the COVID team in a shortened model for tracking and response. And then we'll keep cleaning and having PPE available as is appropriate, given the direction we have at that time. And then you guys know the most important thing is to just say thank you to everyone who's worked with us. This presentation, represents probably 4 months of team meetings and input from parents and staff, and decisions on the part of parents to then decide what they're going to accept in terms of services. And the reality is it's a lot of hard work to get to something we can boil down to this many slides for you guys. I would say that the staff have been exceptional this spring and worked very hard. Students have worked hard. Parents have been great, great, great partners in this development. And we are super thankful to operations who are about to pivot from graduation to starting to do logistics on ESY for June 28th. And these are the folks who run it on a daily basis: Lisa Friedman for elementary, Robin Fabiano for high school, and Dee Gretchen at the middle school. So thank you. Great. Questions?
Just thank you very much for all you're doing.
Yeah, I think last year's program was incredibly successful, and clearly a lot of hard work has gone into this summer's as well. And I just, I think it's a great accomplishment that we ran it last year. It seems a better version this summer. So thank you and congrats for getting us this far.
Well, thank you for that. And it reflects a lot of hard work on the part of many people in the buildings. And Lemma will now join me in all the hard work of figuring out how we're going to pay for all of the details of this, and do that and report back to you as we have specifics on that as well.
Okay, great.
So that's sort of the picture on summer programming. At the last meeting, Tony, you had asked if maybe Mr. Redmond could talk a little bit about the plans for intervention at the middle school next year. And, I think it's thematically all in the same category, right, about academic support and recovery. So I asked Mike if he could just spend a few minutes on that tonight. And I am also running the slides for Mike. So just one sec, I gotta switch to that. Uh-oh, sorry, I've got a bunch of things popping up on my screen here. Oh, you know what? It's the same program, isn't it, Mike? You heard the same? Yes. I was just supposed to move to the next slide. All right, there we go. I turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks. I'm going to try to do this without a 4-year-old running in and interrupting me right now while he fights bedtime. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to share a little bit of a piece of the scheduling work we've been able to accomplish. The scheduling work that's been with our scheduling consultant, and there's been a lot of people involved that it would take me a while to thank, but it's been sort of this exciting piece of work through the pandemic that I feel like has been very forward thinking. And so if you recall, my very long presentation to many of you about the entry plan that I completed, there was a question that came up about how do we create an intervention model for students to receive extra support and extension. And so over the past few years, that's been a real big question that Mr. K and I have spent a lot of time talking about, members of the staff, and we started to think about that question. And so we really wanted to explore that question. If you remember, that one of the things that I observed had to do with the fact that there's a really robust model of intervention and support in the elementary schools. And I was really curious on how to provide a continuation of that as students come into the middle school, and what that can potentially do overall for student well-being and academic growth. So this was a big question. And I think one of the first things we have to explore is really what is intervention. And many people have many different definitions of intervention, and really what we're focusing on is two parts, both intervention that's remediation and targeted small group support, but also intervention that's enrichment and ways that continue student learning after they've received that instruction during their classes, or just some supplemental work, reteaching that we would like to accomplish so that they master those skills. And so we've really landed here with what we want the purpose for intervention to look like at TMS. And so we entered the scheduling work thinking about this. And so I'm really excited to kind of share this little piece. And so we will be including into our schedule, our new schedule, a 45-minute what I need period for all students. And what I need is not original. It's not something that I came up with. It's definitely something that's out there that other schools do that is part of their schedule. And really, it right in the meaning of it, it explains itself. And so we think that this is going to allow us to have a targeted time in our day. You may recall like hearing things about X block and X block serving many different purposes. And we've tried to, through the scheduling process, define what X block used to like hold for many things and find time specifically in our day for those things to occur. But one of the things we really wanted to have happen was an intervention block. And so, many of our teams have experimented with this over the year. They have talked about how to regroup students throughout their day. We've had a few teams be really successful with this. And so we're kind of putting it all together now and finding a place in our day for this to happen. It's also going to give us an opportunity to provide our learning centers during that time for students that are receiving IEP services. And we think that's going to significantly reduce the impact on their schedule in terms of accessing other things like world language and some of our rotating arts classes, which in the past, some students who have learning center and have that discussion at their IEP meetings have to kind of choose sometimes because of the scheduling conflicts. So by doing this, we're hoping that it's going to reduce some of that. So it'll be that 45-minute block. We will be using data during collaborative work times. Our schedule is built so that our teachers are all collaborating at the same time so that they can have meetings for a variety of different reasons, planning purposes. And one of those being that we really want to spend time looking at the data that we're collecting, whether it be the STAR data that we've been piloting. We've had a couple different rounds of that pilot where we started with a little group of 6th graders, we expanded it to 6th grade, and now we're doing it throughout the whole school, and we're doing it in both literacy and math. Now that we have that information, we really want to try to do something with it. And so we'll be using that. We'll be using the information we collect from MCAS, and we'll also just be using our classroom assessment data that we collect. And during that time, we'll be thinking about in our teams, how do we regroup students across all of our teachers for this to happen? And so the last piece is that this has involved some scheduling changes to support with us, which are really exciting, which completes and builds the system. We have been able to make some cost neutral staffing changes because of the schedule and the way that we're scheduling classes for next year, which is allowing us to shift some classroom teaching positions into having 2 literacy specialists, 3 math specialists, and a reading specialist. So Thurston traditionally had 1 reading specialist, and that was it for the entire building. When we came into this year, we noticed some math deficits in students that we wanted to address. And so we added a math interventionist, which we have had a very small bit of time with and experience with, but we felt that there's definitely value into having that. So we'll have a math specialist designated at each grade level. We'll have literacy specialists separated between the half the building for 3 and 3 of our teams, and then we have a reading specialist. So you might be wondering what's the difference between a literacy specialist and a reading specialist. Reading specialist provides a little more of a higher level of service focused on learning how to read, decoding, whereas our literacy specialists are really supporting student learning that's closer to the grade level work that they're doing. So we'll be implementing this team during that win block time to make our groups smaller and have more those smaller targeted groups. So there's extra staff for that to happen to deliver that instruction that we want to have happening. And then we'll also be utilizing the staff during the blocks of the day, much like you would see in the elementary setting where the specialists are co-planning and co-teaching with our classroom teachers And that's really beneficial for some of the workshop model types of activities that we really want to start to move towards. So it's really exciting, and I'm very appreciative of everything that Emily, Allison, and Abby have done to support me with this work, and we're looking forward to the fall. So we think that this is going to have a really nice impact overall for students, a level of support for them, and ultimately higher levels of growth, hopefully.
And
yeah, I just want to thank you for thank you for making progress on. I know this has been a tough year to make progress on curriculum, but I think this is great. I mean, we've talked about this, I know, over the last several years. This is phenomenal. So thanks for making progress on this initiative.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I particularly appreciate that you've sort of reallocated resources to enable to provide more services for the general education population. I think that that's one of the strengths of this district, that you don't have to be on in special education to receive support. And that's certainly not true in some other districts. So I very much appreciate that. I still would like to understand a little bit more the WIN block. And really, you know, I know it's a great time for specialists, for special education services. I'm just wondering, what's the structure going to be? And we don't have to get into it today. I think at some point we'll probably talk more about the schedule, but I'm just really trying to understand what it's going to be for those kids who aren't, you know, who don't need those supports, and whether there'll be enough structure or whether it will just be sort of a X block.
I have that same question. May
I do want to clarify that general ed teachers are also involved in intervention. So whereas the specialists would be providing direct services to small groups during that intervention block, other kids would be working with classroom teachers. So it's not that those 6 specialists are running around trying to, you know, do groups with everybody across the grade. There are other adults that are involved in that as well.
But is that self-selecting? Like, do I as a 7th grader need to say, oh, I need some more help in math, I'm going to go use my WIN block to talk to my math teacher? Mm-hmm. Or is it, I mean, just because I think that there are some students who absolutely are self-motivated enough to go do that. But then there's other kids who think, hey, it's a free block. And so that's my only concern with this WIN block, is that I know that, you know, when we had X block and advisory and they were alternating, there were different experiences for different students dependent on who your advisory group was, or who your, you know, and I think consistency, and I think, Mike, you and I have talked about this. For me, what's important for this block is consistency. And if there is a point to it, right? If there's a curriculum that can be implemented, if you're not that kind of kid who will self-select and go decide, I need to go see my English teacher because I need help structuring my essay.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it might be someone who doesn't, you could have different scenarios. You might have the student who is doing just fine and doesn't feel they need to go for anything extra. So what will they be doing?
Right.
And you might have the student who doesn't really feel they're doing fine, but maybe doesn't have the personality to kind of step up and say, this is what I need. I don't know.
So I guess what I would say to that is just to bring you back to our definition of intervention, which we're talking a lot about, like students who need remedial help or something like that. We're also, in part of our definition, is a focus on enrichment and extended learning opportunities. And so students who teachers are talking about the data with, who will identify those students who have maybe mastered skills in this particular unit or lesson, there's going to be teachers assigned to that group of students to think about ways that they can expand that learning. So by providing opportunities that we can't provide during maybe the normal class period, those could be project-based, hands-on, similar to some of the work we're doing right now in social studies, just extended opportunities that go beyond to challenge and keep them progressing at the rate they want to progress or need to progress. So there's many different ways to then transition over time for students who are self-motivated to create their own sort of plan. And I think we can get there eventually. But I think the key to this is the teacher team sitting together, talking and designating locations for students and the plan for them within that environment. So,
but will
I
get the enrichment point, and I like that. I know that's been an issue in the past too, where there are students who can go way beyond what's taught in the regular classroom. And then you have the students who are going to get, the extra help that they need. But what about the ones in the middle? Where do they go? Where do they go during WIN? What are they doing?
Yeah. The great thing about, in an intervention model, it's data driven and it's cyclical. Right. And so, a team of teachers might be saying, okay, in this moment, here are the learning standards that we're currently working towards, right? This particular set of skills. And they're constantly doing sort of quick, formative assessments so that they can check in and say, okay, who needs what right now? And so the groups are flexible and changing. And it's sort of, in an intervention model, you would hope that you would have short cycles of intervention because you're just trying to identify skills that you can target and kind of shore up to keep everybody moving in the right direction. So I don't want to speak for Mike, but I think, it's going to take some time to get that process internalized. But I think it's a very exciting step that's happening here at the middle school. We, as Tony said, we have been talking for a long time about sort of the middle school. And, I want to compliment Mike and his staff because I think they've been very thoughtful in saying, well, if we want something to change, then we're going to have to change something, right? So we'll see how this plays out. But, and we do have a really good model for it in the elementary. So I think we can learn from that.
Okay, great. Any other questions on the student academic status and recovery presentation? Okay, moving on to building use.
Building use, yes. All right, changing topics. So
yes.
I'm actually going to loop back for 1 second. I want to thank the school committee for recognizing that the middle school and actually at the high school with their scheduling work have really done some remarkable strategic work, even while managing kind of the day-to-day issues of COVID. And I'm fairly blown away by how they've managed to do a process that in a normal year would be an enormous amount of work and represent a lot of change. And so just kudos to them. Building use. So we have been having some discussions and we think that in this fall that we would be ready to open the buildings back up for use by the community. And so Lemma and I just wanted to bring that to you tonight to see if you have any objections to our doing that. If we opened it back up, it would be nice to be able to tell folks now that we can start scheduling things in September. Our intention would be to keep the building use rates that were in place the same. The only thing that would be changing, and this is in keeping with the existing policy the school committee has, is that the custodial rate, so not the rental fees, right, but the custodial rate changes with the custodian's contract. So it would be that of an increase.
And presumably all of the sort of protocols that we have in place during the day would remain in place for the building use.
Yes, we would do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there are any thoughts on that issue.
So I guess I'm okay with that. I guess is this also a question on visitor policy? Will that, I know it's a little bit different, but that may change as well, presumably, if we're changing the building use policy.
I think that it will. I think that it will. I mean, that's like, yes, exactly. Something on a long list of things that we need to think about. But, we've throughout the year, the community's been wonderful, but we've continued to get requests from community groups to use our buildings. And we think that it's probably time to.
No, I mean, I personally find with, I think, on a different topic for next year, I'd love to better understand. I know we would start looking at the economics of this. This isn't anything urgent, but it would be helpful to maybe look at some point next year at understanding. It's been a bit of this topic we've talked about, but I don't think we've ever spent a lot of time at. But at some point, it'd be helpful to look at this more deeper, a broader topic. So. Yeah,
we're in total agreement. I think Lemma is very interested in doing that. We just didn't think we could get it in place for the fall.
I'm again, given, assuming everything else continues to trend well on the public health metrics, I'm very comfortable with it.
I agree. I think it sounds good. I think there's a need in the community for the space. I support that.
Okay.
All right. Well, then we'll move forward with that. Great.
You want to keep going with the planning for 2021?
Okay, yes. So planning for next year. So I mean, obviously, as you've heard tonight, we're busy sort of closing out this year, right? And also thinking about immediate needs associated with summer, but of course, we are actively planning for the next school year and all that entails in terms of scheduling and staffing and class placements. So I mentioned in my packet to you that the district leadership team is planning a retreat for a day in June. And I'm really hoping that somehow everything's just going to clear its way for that day. And we're all going to be able to really think strategically about next year. We want to get back to that strategy for district improvement, talk about some goals for next year. And obviously after that retreat, I'll be interested to talk to the school committee and keep thinking about that strategic planning. As Tony mentioned, we've also been speaking with the COVID medical advisory group, just sort of saying, what do you think? What do you think's on the horizon for us? Are there things that we should be thinking about in terms of the fall? And as we mentioned, we are awaiting some information from the Department of Education about what their expectations and requirements are for us next year. Superintendents have a lot of questions, as you might imagine. And I alluded to the fact I think there's some desire on the part of the state to delay some of that decision making. And they're kind of getting pushback from us saying, we'd like the answers to these questions like in 20 minutes, if possible, right? We really need to know these things. So there's a little push and pull there. We are supposed to get this initial guidance in a couple of weeks, and we'll see where we are. To put things in perspective, in a typical year, just as an example, the high school master schedule, we would have done a first run of that schedule like over April vacation, because it's an iterative process. There are conflicts to be worked out. You've got to assign staff. So the idea that we might get big news at the end of June or July is, concerning. Even just thinking about things like what will lunch look like next year has significant implications in terms of things like scheduling specials at the elementary. So at this point, we are, I would say we're really identifying what the questions are and then thinking about how to answer them. So, are we going to need the COVID team in place next year? This issue of pool testing. Will we need that? For whom? Would the state continue to provide funding? How will the mask policy need to be adjusted? Obviously, what are the implications of vaccines being available for 12 and up? How does that impact things like lunch and food service? So we're thinking about all these things. And as we all know, over the last, 24 hours, things have really changed. Massachusetts has said that everyone ages 12 and up are eligible for the vaccines. And, I have to think that that's really going to change what school can look like in, say, grades 7 to 12 next year, if it is possible to have a student body that could be more or less fully vaccinated. So I think we need to contemplate that. The CDC's information this afternoon that fully vaccinated individuals could stop wearing masks both indoors and outdoors and don't need to physically distance. I mean, obviously at this point, what I know about that is what I read in the Boston Globe a couple hours ago. But I think that, you know, I heard that news and thought that seems like big news. And I think will have significant implications for us. So we need time to digest that information. And then I would say that right now, one of the sort of most pressing and very important questions that we have is about how we will support students who, due to medical circumstances, will continue to require fully remote learning in the fall. And we fully understand that that could also impact those students' siblings who may also need to remain at home. We currently have just over 200 students who have opted to remain fully remote for the remainder of this year for a variety of reasons. And I want to acknowledge, I think it's, you know, it's been a very hard year for many of those students to be in that model. More than half of those students are old enough to be eligible for the vaccine now, though. So that is a very interesting development. That leaves about 80 students who are currently fully remote, who wouldn't be old enough for the vaccine. However, as more and more individuals are vaccinated, the overall COVID metrics improve and it makes it safer for everyone. So, you know, we're really thinking about this. There will be people who, for documented medical reasons, cannot return to in-person learning, and we will, of course, work with those families to accommodate that situation. We are not planning for a fully remote model as it exists this year, but I am actively exploring how we can leverage our collaborative. As you know, we belong to a collaborative called TEC, along with a number of surrounding districts, Medfield, Needham, Dover, Wayland. We have historically provided access to virtual classes. This is pre-pandemic through TECA, which is one of 2 chartered virtual academies in Massachusetts. And TECA is affiliated with TEC, our collaborative. As a TEC member district, Westwood students can take classes through TECA, but remain enrolled as Westwood students. And so I'm thinking about that, having some conversations. I've been in some meetings with folks from DESE and a few superintendents from TEC. And I think DESE is shaping up a waiver process. Details are somewhat unclear, but we hope that through that process, we could get approval to allow us to leverage that partnership to support students who need a fully remote program in the fall. So we will be communicating with our fully remote families next week to understand their thinking and their needs for the fall. And I'm imagining, and Abby, Allison, and I have talked a lot about this, that it probably will have to be a very individualized, interactive process to talk to each family about what their circumstances are and how we can work out an accommodation. So we're thinking about that. So that's what's on our minds, but I did tonight just want to ask the committee from your perspective, if there are things that you think we should be thinking about here in the district, if there's something that we should be talking about as a committee next month, sort of where we are.
So I think that what I think it's a tough time for parents of right now, just trying to plan for the fall. And you know, I wish we could give more guidance, but the truth is we are waiting for DESE. I mean, that's the bottom line, is we're waiting for them to tell us what they will and will not allow for the fall. And I wish we could say this is the plan, but we can't. And I recognize, and I'm sure everyone else does, that uncertainty can be very unsettling. But we're just asking, you know, we're doing what we can. We are in discussions with DESE, and we are telling them what we would like to see. I think what might be helpful, Emily, is at some point, if TECA becomes a real possibility, and I know we need to wait for DESE to tell us whether or not they'll allow that, but if it does, I think we need to really sort of understand, as you know, parents should understand that program more. Like, what is the curriculum? What is the asynchronous versus synchronous learning? You know, how can you move in and out? What if you try, you know, you try it and then your kid gets vaccinated? Could you bring them back into school? So I think, you know, if that becomes a real solution, and I know what we are hoping it will, then I think a lot more of that information would be helpful for parents.
I think that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's right. I think that's important. I mean, you know, I do want to be clear that based on the conversations that the meetings I've been a part of with DESE, you know, I do not believe that there will be the opportunity to say, here's a fully remote option for anyone who would like to take this option next year. But the state is very focused on getting students back to in-person learning. And I have to say that I think that makes sense, that, you know, we've talked a lot this year about the fact that the in-person model, you know, I think is the most effective model in most circumstances. Having said that, it's just not possible for everyone right now to be in person, and I understand that. So I think we need to get some good information and to hear from our fully remote families. I was hoping that we would have more information from the state so that I could explain what the parameters were to folks before asking them, you know, to provide input. But it's getting late. So I think we need to get started on that process next week. And as we really identify who would need an accommodation for a fully remote program next year, we can talk very specifically with them about what that might look like.
Yep. Anyone else?
So maybe is your question, I just want to make sure I understand the question, the committee superintendent.
Yeah.
Is your question around, is it COVID specific, or is it more around what are the goals for next year? Because they're connected, but there's obviously a COVID lens, but there's also the broader question around the goals.
So yeah. I will acknowledge I was really talking about COVID right now. Okay. I'm interested in, you know, anything else that we want to talk about, but I really, okay. I think right now, yeah, it's two prongs, right? But we really are trying to identify what are the things that we have to work through in terms of what the learning model will look like next year, okay. and sort of COVID parameters and whatnot.
Well, yeah, I guess this is my view. So, which might be a little bit different, but so I would like to actually also understand, I don't know if the offsite's between now and the next school committee. I'd actually like to also understand, assume everything continues to go well. Let's just be optimistic. Mm-hmm. I'd like to have a discussion around the goals for next year, assuming everything goes well. I understand there's a COVID lens, but I think, as we heard from Mr. Redmond, I think we've done a lot of great work there. We continue to make progress in DE&I. I'd like to actually also, the committee, to start really, like we've done in the past, really use June as a chance to think about the broader goals on curriculum and other initiatives as well. I mean, that's maybe me. So if we could, I know there's a COVID lens, and that's obviously important, but let's assume things go well. I'd like to also understand what are the goals for next year, kind of broader.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tony. And I would, I think we all should think about that. And, I would love to start talking about those things again.
Yeah, I mean, I know everyone would. I just.
I think we should all start thinking about that. What do we want to see outside of the COVID lens, right? What do we want to see, and what does this committee want to communicate to the district and the administration about what we think are important goals? I think that's a great point.
Thank you. I would just say, every week new information comes out. So if we could keep each other informed over the next few weeks, so by the time we come together in June, we're maybe all well informed about what's been happening. Just today, what Emily said was, if you're vaccinated, it's all right not to wear a mask indoors or outdoors. But they also said, just stay away from large clusters of people, so they're saying if you're a cluster of people inside at a wrestling match or so, so there's subtle little things. I think one scenario is to look at, is everything going perfect and everything not going perfect? And how can we be best prepared for all of this? The perfect situation is kids in the next couple of months are going to be vaccinated at lower levels. So an option is out there. We could vaccinate everybody. The governor has said he's not going to require state workers to get vaccinated. And the attorney general says she's going to require everybody. So it's very confusing at the moment in guidance. There's 9 diseases that we require kids entering schools to have. There's laws in place, and no one's really dying of these things unless it's a cluster of people with mumps in New York. So the issue is there is a state policy already, and we have close to 600,000 people have died from this disease. So the bottom line is the state is either going to say, we require, as all these other laws say, everybody has to be vaccinated to go back to school. That's one option. Option 2 is we strongly recommend everybody doing it. And I'm not sure if it's correct, but I just saw the superintendent of schools in Needham just said everybody can be vaccinated before they go back to school in Needham. So the state may say it's up to the town to decide, but would recommend that. So that's another issue for us to have to deal with that may come up based on where these decisions come down. But I do think, we need to be prepared for all of these things. But one thing I think we need to be prepared for is no matter what happens, we need to see if we all agree that everybody, as many people should be vaccinated who can be vaccinated safely, and encourage people to do it. Because there's a strong anti-vaccine population out there who will fight it just like they fight the need to get tested. So whatever it is, that's another issue we're going to have to need to be prepared for no matter what comes down the pike on these other things. And the other thing, the worst case scenarios are these variants that come out and we need to revaccinate people and all. That's a possibility. And it's a worry of a lot of serious people. So we need to be prepared for all of these things. It's week by week, day by day. What's our best decision in January? But I think, you really got a good handle on what are the ways we may need to deal with these things, including, keep people who don't want to get vaccinated for the time being, they get educated at home. But, I don't think I'm not counting on the state saying at this stage, every kid has to be vaccinated to go back to school. I don't see them doing it, maybe, but we got to prepare. If they don't, what do we want to do from there? Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
So I do think, I think about all the work we did last summer in terms of that fall reopening plan, and we developed a lot of different protocols, and the school committee adopted policies. And, I think we're in the process of taking a look at all of those things now and saying which things have to stay, which things can go, what could be modified. So there's sort of that piece. And all of those things have implications for how we go about a lot of the work of getting ready for school next year in terms of schedule and staff and all that. So we're thinking through that. I absolutely agree with you, Tony. I can't wait to talk about something else. So our leadership retreat is on June 7th. And so, we'll have an opportunity to talk before the next school committee meeting. And I think, honestly, we all just need to be together again to have a conversation. And we'll do that. And I think it would be great if at the June meeting we could, have some back and forth about what the committee's goals are and what we're thinking about as well.
One of the things that you have listed on here, and they were really an incredible team, was the COVID monitoring and response team.
Mm-hmm.
And I even wonder, maybe things are changing and things are getting better, but maybe the responsibility will be just slightly different. But that also begs the question, the team, the core of the team, Matt Gillis, Paul Lilla, we would hope that sports will just be a regular thing next year. So we wouldn't necessarily have them as resources, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's, all the points that you make in the memo that you provided. I know we're talking COVID again. I can't seem to get away from it. I don't think any of us can. But that's an important crew, but again, crystal ball. what are things going to shape up like? But I guess we have to consider who would make up that team, because you know better than I, but Paul and Matt, two of the core folks, and Karen, God bless her, she wants to do it again. That was quite the responsibility. So
yeah,
I think
I just did a quick comment related to the learning model for next year, and students potentially maybe certain students with medical needs going through TECA and their siblings and whatnot. I was just thinking about how a lot of those families have had like an extraordinarily difficult year, probably more so than a lot of us. And if there's anything that we could do next year to provide, some SEL opportunities or to support families, make them feel like they're still tied in with the WPS community. If we could think creatively about that, I think, the families probably need more support than others.
yes. Thanks for that comment, Amanda. Yeah, I mean, we do want to work hard to keep people connected to the community and feeling supported. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this is, this is a good team to think, as you said, Amanda, creatively about ways to do that, to keep those remote learners part of the Westwood community. I mean, it's nice to say that even if you go to TECA, you'll still be getting a Westwood education or be considered a Westwood student. But I think it would be nice for us to also really make them feel that way as well, not just in paperwork.
Yeah, right. I agree. And, you had said something, Maya, about transitioning, the ability to transition.
Yes.
And, it's unclear, but it does seem like vaccines eligibility being extended to younger kids, is a very real possibility, maybe in 6 months. And so, absolutely, we would always make sure that the moment that somebody is able and ready to return to in person, we'd be ready to, welcome them into that. We would plan for that possibility, right? So that people can return when they're able. There are two specific issues I just want to mention tonight that are concrete. So one is that we've continued to look at whether or not we can keep Deerfield on the same schedule as the other 4 elementary schools. And we think we can make that happen. So we're proceeding with that plan, which we think will be great to have all 5 schools on the same schedule. And then secondly, so I've been watching our elementary enrollments. I mentioned kindergarten in particular in the memo, but actually I'm looking at the enrollments at all levels. And as you will remember, in the budget, we had added 3.0 FTE general ed teachers at the elementary level. And it is clear to me that we will need to add at least one other teacher at the elementary. That the middle school scheduling model is actually creating a 1.0 FTE position that was budgeted for the middle school, but now could be reallocated to the elementary level. And so I would like to recommend moving that position into the elementary. So it's cost neutral. It would just be moving it from one cost center to the other. And I think it will likely be at Downey, but those 3 positions that we put into the budget, remember we said we were going to wait to actually allocate them until we had a better sense of how the enrollment was shaking out. So,
okay.
That.
So do you need us to do anything now, or is this just a heads up?
I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah.
That is what the plan is, and make sure that seems fine. It doesn't change anything in terms of the budget, but just to sort of get the green light from that, because that's going to impact how we think about class placement.
Okay.
Perfect.
So this is additional kudos to Mike for his scheduling project, right? It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, it's quite the hero. So, and I am just, as always, I'm keeping my eye on those class sizes. You know how it works in our elementary schools, right? The small schools doesn't always break quite the way that you hope that it will, but we're keeping a close eye on that. We'll continue to do that over the next month or so.
Okay, great. Okay, anything else on planning for next year? Okay. Moving into, we have a first reading of the revised policy specific to face masks. And as we have been discussing, there is late breaking news on this. We had originally revised this to say if you are on the to be consistent with the new Massachusetts guidance, which came out a few weeks ago, which said if you were outdoors, you did not need, and you were able to socially distance, 6 feet or more, you did not need to wear a mask. If you recall, our fields, you had to be fully masked at all times. We didn't have any exceptions for that. And we were saying, if you're on school grounds and you're outside, now we're saying you don't need to be masked if you can maintain social distance. That's what this revised mask policy says, and just to be consistent with Massachusetts. I don't think Massachusetts has adopted the late breaking CDC guidelines yet. So I would actually recommend we make this change now. It's just a first reading, but that we continue with this first reading revision. And then we sort of see what, at least this piece, right? Let's update this piece. And then if we need to make further additions, we can, but I don't want to hold up, I don't know if anyone disagrees with me, but I don't want to hold up updating this policy just to wait and see what happens. I think if we have to make these in incremental changes, we will.
Great. This is going to be a continued process. I mean, we can continue to change it over the next several months. So I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think is there any discussion about the actual revisions to the policy and no? Do I have to get a motion to actually waive the reading?
No.
Does anybody know?
It's fine. It's just,
I don't,
nope,
right?
It's just a first reading.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So anything further on face masks? No. Okay. All right, moving on to our action items. So the first vote we have is to submit the statement of interest for the Sheehan School to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Can I get a motion? Oh, go ahead.
I want to make one comment about that. So we actually, we updated the document that is linked in your packet this afternoon, and that is because we're in the process right now of doing the SOI, and we think actually we should submit in 2 different priority areas. And so if you take a look there, Lemma, do you want to say what the 2 priority areas are?
Hi, yes, I can. So the priorities, and I think, Emily, we might need to read the text of this. So are you comfortable with that? I can read it out loud. And that would include covering the priorities.
I'll put it on the screen so that we can all see it. How's that?
That'd be great, yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you see that, or should it be bigger?
I can see it. But I can read it if helpful. So resolved, having convened in an open meeting on May 13th, 2021, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the School Committee of Westwood, Massachusetts, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Mass School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated June 25th, 2021, for the Sheehan Elementary School located at 549 Pond Street, Westwood, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. And priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Mass School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority or commits the school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Okay.
So again, the new priority here is priority 5, but we felt that it was, but both priority 5 and priority 7 were quite pertinent for the Sheehan School application.
Great. So can I get a motion to make this vote, to approve this vote?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Charlie,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So the motion is carried. Okay, our second action item is the annual vote on school choice. Just to give a little bit of background, as you recall, this is coming out of the Educational Reform Act of 1993, which requires that the enrollment of non-resident students under the school choice provision, it requires districts districts have to vote by June 1st to opt out of that program, not to participate in that program. And what that program does is allow non-resident students the choice of where to attend school, unless a district opts out of the program. Westwood has historically opted out of the program for a few reasons. Mainly, there's a maximum reimbursement. The way it works, as you recall, is the school choice provision will reallocate funds from the sending district and give it to the receiving district. But there is a maximum reimbursement allowed by the school choice provision, and that maximum reimbursement is actually less than Westwood's per pupil expenditure. So if we opted into this program, it would hit our operating budget. We would be required to subsidize each of those students, the non-resident students. So we have historically opted out of the program, and we have a resolution here where, again, we would opt out of the program. So can I get a motion to opt out of this program?
So moved.
May I think you have to read the resolution.
Oh, sorry, I have to read the resolution. Okay, so the school choice vote, whereas the Educational Reform Act of 1993 requires that the enrollment of non-resident students under the school choice provision, unless the committee votes by June 1st not to participate, and whereas the school choice provision reallocates funds from the sending district and awards such funds to the receiving district, and whereas the maximum reimbursement allowed by the school choice provision is less than Westwood's per pupil expenditure, which means Westwood Public Schools would be required to subsidize each choice student. And whereas once Westwood accepts a choice student, Westwood must keep such student through graduation, regardless of whether Westwood's demographic situation has changed. And whereas it is likely that a number of students will return to their sending districts or otherwise leave Westwood, thus creating a potential income loss to the district. Now hereby be it resolved that the Westwood School Committee respectfully declines to participate in the school choice program, provided, however, that if surrounding school districts subsequently and prior to June 1 decide to accept the provisions of school choice, the Westwood School Committee reserves the right to do likewise in order to protect its fiduciary interests in this matter. Can I get a motion to accept this vote?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Charlie,
I support.
Carol,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Motion is carried. Okay, next action item is the approval of the revised policy on the intra-district transfer policy. Do I need to read this vote?
No.
Do we have a resolution or no? This is just the
last reading of the policy, and so you can entertain a motion to approve it.
All right. I would like to entertain a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Charlie,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amanda?
Yeah.
And I am a yes as well. Motion is carried. Okay, our next action item is approval of the April 8th, 2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, Charlie? Charlie, I think you're on mute.
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Our final action item is approval of the May 4th, 2021 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Charlie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
All right, and I am a yes. Motion's carried. Okay, is there any new business that anyone wants to raise? No? All right. Then can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion. Charlie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
And I am a yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carol, again,
Yes.
for a
thank you,
wonderful
Carol.
year.
Thank you all.
Good job on
Thank you,
your first
Carol.
meeting, Maya.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, everyone.